All right, good afternoon. I am calling to order the Budget and Finance Committee Human Resources Working Group. Thank you to Council Members Jacob Coopin as well as Jennifer Webb for attending today's work group. We do have Aaron Pratt, Finance. My mind has just gone blank. I'm sorry. Michelle Lane, as well as, don't you tell me, Mary Jo Wiggins.
You passed the
They
test.
know that one at
You
least.
passed the test, Chair.
For
You have passed the test.
People I've known for years. I'm sorry.
It's a vacation week.
It is a vacation
Oh, yeah.
week. It is a vacation week.
Missed that now.
But the purpose, just to recap, the purpose of the Human Resources Working Group is we are looking at vacancies across the department to determine, looking at vacancies across departments, looking at those salary savings to determine if those funds are more appropriately used in other ways. We see salary savings going into the fund balance every fiscal year, at the end of every fiscal year. And we know because of our fund balance policy, once money is in the fund balance, anything above our required level of revenue to be in those accounts are surplus funds, but surplus funds are only available for one-time expenses. Whereas if we were able to capture some of that money during the fiscal year as part of the operating budget, perhaps those funds are better used in other ways. Also, I think the salary savings goes towards transparency. So if a department is using, salary savings for training, maybe their training budget should be larger, or that money should be labeled as training, so that when the public is looking at how that department spends its money, it's clear where that money is going, and it's not just a bucket of money that the department is using at its discretion. And that has been a major topic of discussion for the past 2 budget cycles, whether or not we could use salary savings for something else, whether or not we could reduce department budgets. Obviously, that has always met with a lot of consternation from departments, and the council always wants to make sure our departments have everything that they need, but it's also looking at, again, going back to that transparency as well as efficiency, whether or not those funds are better used in other ways. And so what we did at the last meeting, we looked at some fiscal year 24 data, which those accounts don't get closed out until this month. Is it this month?
Yes.
Okay. So we don't know, as far as fiscal year 24 is concerned, we don't know what actual money the departments have left over. So we decided to look back at fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, to look at that data, and then using that data, we can identify maybe 5 to 10 departments who have like the most money left over, if any, and think about asking some more probing questions as to how those salary savings are being used by those departments. And so, Mr. Pratt, we have the spreadsheet that you put together for fiscal year 22 and 23. So if you could start with 22 and just explain to us what we are looking at.
Of course, thank you. First, I do want to note that I do have a tabulation error in column I, which is supposed to total the total vacancy. So that actually, I'll update that and send that over to Margaret Darby and her team to get that updated. But the other cells, as far as calculations, are updated and are working correctly.
Okay.
So what we presented last time when we first met was the vacancies by department. These are all general fund vacancies by the department, and then what the targeted amount, or what the vacancy amount was, and this is at the 13th month, which we call the end of June 30th. So it accounts for everything that has transacted and been actualized for those departments. And then when we were meeting, we were requested to provide additional information on the budget, the actual budget for that department, and then the actual consumption of the budget for the whole fiscal year to match with the 13th period. And what you're presented with today is that report. In this report, in columns S, or I'm sorry, not columns S, sorry, in the overall budget, you will find the starting budget and the ending budget, or the budget for that department. In the F22 overall actuals, you'll find the actuals that were used by that department. And then in the FY22 remaining budget, that's how much budget was actually remaining after all obligations were fulfilled. So then you get to a usage percentage, and then at the very bottom are the totals. So, for instance, in fiscal year 22, $31.3 million was returned to fund balance for departments for underuse. And that will be the same for the fiscal year 23 report in the same sort of format. And of that, if you look across, and again, it's still broken out by department, you'll see that some departments had some, return of fund balance, and some departments had some use of fund, or some full use of their budget. The budget, again, as we presented last time, there's a bunch of nuances to the report, things that we did not know as far as what the department needed to undertake in order to consume their budget. If there's vacancies, we would assume that there's increase in other expenditures like professional services, and then overtime wages, hourly wages. So some of those consumptions could have been portions of that, because the work still needs to be done, and the departments will have the relative information based on what they need to do to close out the fiscal year. And then also some of this is based on, they may have been directed to use a certain portion of the budget to cover something. As we talked through the budget process, we asked the departments to cover any obligations that they may undertake, and then a lot of times they tell us that they can consume their obligations, wanted obligations in their budget. We give them the capacity to do that, because the budget is based on the total amount, both personnel and operating. So a lot of departments have been very masterful in utilizing and maximizing their budgets in order to meet their obligations without requesting additional funds from Metro.
Okay. So the column with the salary remaining funds, you're calculating that based off their vacancies?
Based off the vacancies as of 6/30, and we're only for this, again, looking at single incumbent positions. We're not looking at any shared positions, so this is total permanent FTEs that we're looking at, so yes.
So if someone has $1 million in salary remaining funds, but 0 remaining budget, that means they use those funds.
Correct.
Can I ask a question? Is like hotels, for example, want to keep their vacancy right around 5%, for example. Is there a best practice number? What's the best practice number for what you want to see in remaining and return to the fund? Is there, like, when we see 31, 32, are we saying, great, we want to have that give and take, or are we saying, wow, that's a little more than maybe we want, or what does that look like?
I think that's a question that has a lot of different layers. I think HR would be best positioned to talk about attrition, sort of the attrition rate that we would expect for certain departments, certain classifications, certain job occupations. We do expect when we're going into the budget process that something will be returned, but the way we actually start the budget process and the way we coordinate with our other finance partners, that once we set a budget or once the budget is approved by council, we assume that maybe 100% would be expended, because that's the best way we can project what's going to be needed for the next fiscal year. But then always something is returned. The contract started at a different time, or the procurement cycle just didn't work out, or things get delayed, or the hiring process, they couldn't find adequate candidates. So then that always compounds on, how much of the funds in the fiscal year are going to be consumed. So that question, probably is best answered for HR.
Great, thank you.
So I'm looking at, and I'm looking at council members, I'm looking at the salary remaining funds for both fiscal year 22 and 23. A couple of large ones stick out. So the 14.6 million for police in fiscal year '22 and the 15.5 million for fiscal year '23. And I know police have a lot of overtime expenses. But still would be very interested to know how they're spending. Is that all overtime? Is that, training? Looking at fire at 8.9 million in fiscal year '22, 9.99 million in fiscal year 23. Parks is at 7 in '23, 6 in fiscal year '22. NDOT, wait a minute, we're looking at, salary savings, sorry. And even with looking at fiscal year '23, NDOT had 4.7 left, but they could also have some outstanding. Well, I was thinking they could have some outstanding projects, but your budget doesn't roll over from year to year, it goes into fund balance. Yes.
Sorry, I do want to make sure that, again, just clarifying what we talked about last time. So 22 and 23 saw a great number of positions added to the budget. So that could be some of the information that you're seeing in here is why, some of these departments had such large returns to fund balance because they didn't fill those positions. I think, I don't know offhand, but I believe at least in 2023 there was over 500 positions, about 500 positions added to the budget, added to Metro. So that was a large number of individuals, and the timing aspect of when those can get hired would take some time. I do also know, and it would be on the department to tell more specifics, but like police and fire, they have the timing of their classes. So a lot of these vacancies aren't really vacant because they're currently in their classes, and then once they roll on and actually make it through the program, then they become certified, and then they consume budget. So some of that could be a timing issue as well of when those classes rolled on, and then when they start to consume the budget.
Okay.
I mean, I think that would be two departments hard to look at because of the way the schooling is. Because like on the fireman, you gotta have 4 to engine, and so if they're not in there, I'm gonna assume most of this was probably overtime. Because I know they pay a lot of overtime right now.
But I think it's good to understand where it's going, right?
Yeah.
I think there may be good reasons for it, and I imagine there are good reasons for it. But to understand, if you've got 15 million and you're using, 99.96% of that somewhere, where is that being used, and do we need to reallocate money to make it make sense?
So I thought we were gonna take the 10 biggest ones and ask specific questions after we got this, right?
Yep.
Is that what?
That's what we talked about last meeting, yeah.
So, which 10 are we taking? You wanna tell us?
Just eyeballing the numbers. Police, fire, parks,
NDOT?
NDOT. Is that 1, 2, 3, 4?
Bet you Mr. Pratt can push a button on resort the columns.
I mean skip over the sheriff because I know they are in a negative this past fiscal year.
Social services and
DEC.
public library. See,
DEC looked high.
General
Yeah.
services, IT.
Planning looked high, right?
Let's see.
Planning's 2.1. Health is 2.5.
public library, 2.5, and health is 2.4. And Department of Emergency, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You just wanna do those 8, anything over 2 million? Oh, there's one more, planning.
Fire, parks,
9.
NDOT. Planning.
be curious to see about codes and as well.
Codes, okay. General services,
Do we want to look at Department of Emergency Communications? Was that on
IT. They had, salary savings?
Yeah, 2.7.
Did you see it? 2.7 million. No, it was 7 in 22 and it was 2.7 in 23. So maybe those are additional positions that were absorbed in 24.
Oh, I'm not seeing that.
It's the two from the bottom.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, I see it.
Yep. Does it make sense to also look at folks that are using the lowest percentage from a reallocation standpoint? Like if some of these got the savings but not using it as well? Does that make sense?
I know what you're saying. Is there someone that falls into that category? Because even the folks that we've just listed, some of them have used that salary savings, some haven't.
Right.
So is there a department that we left out of the list?
Looking like just as an example, internal audit used only 78.94% and had the salary savings. So I don't know if it makes sense to have a separate bucket of people that we say, hey, you're saving the money and you're not. It doesn't seem like you maybe needing the money.
And I noticed that as well, yeah. So, like, even just using them as an example for fiscal year 23, they had $215,000 in salary savings, but they didn't spend $395,000, which means there's maybe some other line items that came in cheaper than they anticipated.
Right. Just wondering if it makes sense to look at those to.
Let's see.
Yeah.
I know. I think we should subcategory them. Like look at the 10 of the highest, and then maybe go 10 of the ones in a different direction.
That's what I was thinking. 10
Yeah.
10 of the highest dollar and 10 of the lowest percentage.
Okay.
Like planning's got both. Planning's got 2.1 in position and 73 in utilization, but some of them don't match up.
Okay.
Let's see.
Let's see. Community oversight is 68.6. Internal audit 78.94. And this, I'm looking at fiscal year 23. Let's see.
Board of Fair Commissioners.
What's the number for the Board of Fair Commissioners?
They are, for utilization percentage, 85.39. 3 from the bottom.
Are we considering that to be low? Like, what's the threshold for?
I think you got to go start from the lowest one, which is the Community Oversight Board.
Yeah.
Right.
I think under 90 was what I was looking at.
Under 90?
Yeah.
Okay.
Like if you're, 10% margin makes sense, but below that.
Okay.
If that gives us too many, we can go 85 and lower.
Okay.
Let's go 85 because there's a lot between that 85 and 89.
Yeah.
So let's go 85.
85 and lower.
Yeah.
And I would say anything that's got an 85 on it, right? This is 85.39, but I would include that in the list. Yeah, community oversight.
The Board of Fair Commissioners, okay.
So there's 7 between
Internal audit.
planning, human resources, assessors of property, agricultural extension, internal audit, board of fair commissioners, and the community oversight board. That's the 7 lowest.
Now, where is the assessor of property?
Up at the top, like the 10th one down.
Okay, yeah, I had that one marked. Okay.
Yeah.
How many do you have total, Jennifer?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. How many do you have?
I have 6.
So let's see who you're missing.
I'm trusting you.
I got planning commission, assessor of property, what's this across right here? Agriculture extension,
Oh, I take that back. I had an 87 in there. Take that back. So,
Okay.
yep, we would match.
okay.
We would match. Yeah. So those 6, yeah.
Alright, let me make sure we have the same for the highest ones. Police, fire, parks, NDOT, planning, codes, general services, ITS, and Department of Emergency Services, Communications.
Is that 10 for you?
I have 9. What do you have?
I had planning, general services, police, fire, codes, health,
Health.
public library, parks, NDOT, and Department of Emergency.
Okay, I don't have health at the public library. That would give me 11.
And
Yes.
so just a couple of nuances. So for Department of Emergency Communications, one thing you may find is that they have a group that reimburses them. So they are kind of motivate them to spend a lot of their money because they get reimbursed from that organization for their costs. So that's probably why they would run a higher sort of expense rate. But then also, I think you called out Board of Fair Commissioners. We subsidize, that's a subsidized department or organization. So them, Ag Extension, Municipal Auditorium, Farmers Market, General Hospital, those are ones that Metro subsidizes as well. So there may be some nuances
Yeah.
to call any of them in because we give them money and we expect them to use a lot of that money because we have to subsidize them for their operations.
Well, the fair was on the other spectrum
Yeah,
of not using it.
yeah. So that would
So-
that may be an anomaly, but they're revenue generating too. They did change some of their fees for parking and stuff. So that could be some of the nuance. But some of those who we subsidize, there's probably another layer of story there too.
So take them off for right now. I have no problem with taking them off, and let's work on the ones that they don't subsidize at this point.
If you want an apples to apples
Yeah,
comparison.
apples to apples.
Okay. Alright, so that leaves us with COB, Fair Commissioners, internal audit.
Agricultural extension.
Was that another subsidized?
Is that another
That's
subsidized
one
one?
that is
Okay.
subsidized, plus they get funds from TSU and UT as
Okay, so
well.
we'll take that off.
What's the difference between subsidized and then direct?
So subsidized is one of the ones where we know that they need help and they've historically asked for help, so we, the council, in the budget process, subsidize them an amount that they need in order to make sure that they can operate. Other departments are just, we are Metro departments that need the funds in order to operate under the business of Metro.
I mean, that might be a group eventually that we look at, the ones
The
that,
subsidized ones.
the subsidized ones, and see if maybe there's anything that we can do to get them from being so subsidized.
That's a great idea. Work with them to help kind of,
I mean,
Okay.
I like it.
Alright, so with the lowest percentage of budget used, COB, internal audit, assessor property, planning commission, highest salary savings, police, fire, parks, NDOT, planning, codes, general services, ITS. Did we want to take off the Department of Emergency Communications?
yeah, for right now, let's take that one off, yeah.
Okay. And then health and public library, so that's 10.
Okay, so I'm missing one, so I have planning, general, police, fire, codes, health, public, library, parks, and NDOT. Which one am I missing?
ITS.
ITS, I remember seeing that on here. Okay. Got it.
Okay. So, we've got our department, so now we need to come up with some questions. Maybe like 3,
Yeah.
5 questions. So starting with our lowest percentage of budget used, what questions would we want to ask those departments?
Try to find a way to phrase, but I don't know, want to say like why aren't you using the money? But like in a more way that gets at the actual question. You know, I mean, I think if you asked anybody, do you have too much? Most people are not going to say no, we don't. You know, but is there a way to kind of get at that substance of?
Maybe it's
I mean, I wonder if we could start with a general kind of question of like, help us understand your vacancies and then where you're spending it.
because we already know. Maybe they could give us insight into what those positions are.
Right.
Because we have a number, but they can tell us what the actual positions are.
What they are, or what the plan is for them. You know, they may say, yeah, we know we've got 70 vacancies. Next year we're doing a big hiring fair to, whatever.
Okay, so which positions are vacant and what is the plan to fill those positions?
Right.
And we're wanting the actual position, not we have 5 vacancies.
Yeah, right, we want the actual position. Even though we said that would be hard to narrow down. I can't remember, we talked about that in the last meeting, something about each department, what they specifically needed. Remember our spreadsheet, remember we talked about it?
I don't remember that part, but I'm thinking about like with Parks. Like Parks has a large number of vacancies, but it's like a big chunk of seasonal positions.
So which positions are still vacant?
Yeah, which positions are vacant?
Are we able to get salary breakdowns for those positions, or does it not get that granular?
Why would we, and just ask some questions,
Yeah.
why would we need to know the salary for the position?
So, and maybe this wouldn't be our purview to look at. I'd be curious if we see positions that maybe don't have the salary. Maybe they don't have the salary commensurate with the position they're trying to fill.
Well,
And
I don't know.
if they've got two $40,000 positions, and we look at it and we kind of realize they're not going to be able to fill that at 40. We say let's combine it to 170 and save the 10 or something. But that may be getting too micromanaging and granular.
I mean, that has been part of conversations amongst council members before. Like you said, if you've got 10 positions at 40,000 and you can't fill them, why not have fewer positions with a higher salary?
Right.
I'm trying to think, how do we, because I think that's a valid recommendation, but will we end up getting too far in the weeds?
Right.
Looking at data that we really don't need to look at.
Right.
I think we wait to get
Maybe
these
do
questions answered.
Maybe do categories.
So not like position by position, but like.
Positions that are under 40,000, under 50.
Right.
Oh, like do like a range or something, so it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
72,009. Yeah, I think that's good. 'Cause I don't need to know down to the dollar, but getting a sense of, you got 72 positions that are 40K and under. Probably not going to fill those versus.
Because I'm looking at, I mean, in most departments, if not all of them, are probably going to have this information readily available.
They're not having it?
I think they would.
I think they would.
I think they would.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that'd be just helpful to get a sense, especially the ones that we're kind of focusing in on.
We'll ask.
Yeah.
If they say it's too hard, we'll reconsider.
Yeah.
But we'll ask the salary for the vacant positions. So which positions are vacant and what's the plan to fill those positions? What's the salary of each position?
Should we ask
And we were just talking about.
where do the funds get allocated? Like where the unused funds being allocated?
Okay.
Like for, police, is it, is it
And we need to
overtime?
specifically ask for fiscal year 22 and fiscal year 23, because that's the data.
That's the data, yeah. So where did that money get allocated to?
Yeah, where did they put it in their budget?
And are we gonna look at 24 as well, or I guess 24 is not finished yet?
Yeah, 24 is not finished. And then for these departments that actually ended up with more money than their salary savings,
But they spent it, right?
no, it went into fund balance. That's
Oh,
why I
it
was
is.
using, what did I use as an example?
Which column are you looking at now?
I think
So
you used,
the remaining budget is what went into fund balance.
like,
Oh, the
internal
remaining,
audit you
okay,
were
yeah.
talking
I
about?
think, was it internal audit?
Where they've got they saved 215 in salary, but they saved 395 total,
Right.
so they saved all the salary and then even more.
So was there a budget item that came in lower? Was there, programming that you didn't get a chance to do?
Yeah.
If so, why? Maybe they didn't have the staff to do a particular program.
Right. Right. That's good.
Okay, so were there budget items that sounds redundant, were there budget items that were under budget?
Have you budgeted the budget items that were under the budget?
If so, please identify those items.
Yeah, what items were under budget, or where did the savings come from?
Okay, were there line items that weren't implemented?
Okay, I just got a question. Okay, so in the overall budget, let's just take one figure. Let's just take fire. So it's 174.
Yes.
So that 9.9 is in that 174?
So so you're looking at 23,
Yeah, 23.
74. Yes.
But you're telling me that 9.9 was salary remaining, but they used it, correct?
Correct.
But we don't know how they used it.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure that's okay. So that's what I was referring to.
Yeah.
How did they use this figure?
Yeah. So like fire had that 9.9, but they only ended up with 378,000 left.
It went back into the fund.
Right. So they spent it somewhere. Where did it get spent?
Yep. So for these high dollar or high level of salary savings, what questions are we asking them?
Well, I think the first thing we got to do is how and where were those remaining funds used?
Okay. How are salary savings? Maybe call it just salary funds used. And then we can identify for fiscal year 22, whatever the number is for fiscal year 23.
Right.
Whatever the number is, okay. Feel free to come on up. It's a working group.
I won't be here that long.
Step right up.
I do have a question whenever it's appropriate to ask.
Okay. Well, we're coming up with questions for the departments. We have a group of the 10 departments that had the highest amount of salary funds remaining. And then we've got a smaller group of 4 departments that had the lowest percentage of budget used. And so we're coming up with our questions for those departments. So what's your question?
My question is whether the numbers, I was listening to the meeting on the way in, whether the numbers that you're looking at have any accounting for departments that came and asked for salary savings to be moved within the salary bucket or some other bucket for use prior to going back to the general fund.
So Mr. Pratt, do departments ask to use their salary savings?
Some departments do. It's not prescriptive. If they do have a large purchase, some departments may approach us to say, we're going to make a large purchase. We know it's one-time usage and get a sort of our sign off on it. But departments are free to allocate and use their whole budget as they are approved by council to use. So they don't have to come and ask us. We try and maintain relationships and partnerships with them to know when they're trying to do that sort of stuff. And we do see it on a workflow perspective. If they're making a movement from their personnel dollars down to their object account or operating dollars, they'll process that through the system to balance out. So we do see those sometimes after the fact.
So with the salary savings, kind of piggybacking on Councilman Evans' question, are department heads, are they deliberately throughout the fiscal year using those additional salary savings, or is it, oh, it's May 1st, you got to spend this money by June 30?
Good question.
Yeah, that'll be best answered by the department. So what we do see is that the timing of some of their expenditures do have some seasonality to it. So we do in the beginning of the year see a lot of departments spending some of their operating dollars. Or we do see towards the end of the year some departments spending their operating dollars based upon what their contracts look like. And then other obligations if they're trying to get ahead of like a current 25-year budget where they didn't have anything. We motivated them like, well, spend your current budget so that way you don't have that much of an impact in fiscal year 25 when we can't give you anything else or when a lot wasn't approved and you do have a savings target. So some of the communication around what we were doing this year was to motivate them to use last year's money, fiscal year 22-24 money.
So would it be reasonable to ask the timing of the
That's my
expenditures?
next question. When were these funds spent? And are you gonna be the one sending out the questions?
I was going to ask Director Darby.
Well, can they make sure they work off like the year 23 figure, since we sort of know that we're, I
So
want
do
to make
you-
sure they generalize that they work off the figure so we can follow
So
them.
do you just want to do fiscal year 23 or ask them about both fiscal year 22 and 23?
That's up to you, I mean,
How much of an additional burden is both years versus one?
That I don't know.
Do we know? Like how much? If we said to them, can you do that for 23 or can you do that for 22 and 23? Are we asking them to do two full processes, or is it kind of like a click of a button, or?
It'll be probably manual to a certain extent because they would have to go and look at the transactions to see and provide an explanation of what was done. I think 23 would be more closer to 9 and more relevant
it's not-
2 years past COVID, and then normalized expenditures. It may give you a more accurate perception.
I think I'd
So
be curious.
one question about that. So if we just did 1 year, what if that fiscal year 23 is like, and I don't think that it is, but what if it's just an anomaly? Whereas if you have someone who's got $2 million 2 years in a row,
Can
it
they-
seems to be more of a pattern.
And I think it's a good point to kind of see the trends. Would it be appropriate to ask them to do 23 in full and start to give us a sense of 24 and have that done by the end of 24, so at least the work they do is towards the
Because
most
would the
accurate data?
departments know how their budgets
Yeah,
have
'cause
ended for
it's
fiscal year
closed.
24?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, that's what I think would be good.
So
'cause
go
you're looking at
23 and
real
24,
figures.
then you
Yeah.
got the most accurate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Jared, got another question.
Yes.
So kind of going back to Director Pratt's comment about the object and kind of learning about that after the fact, I am just thinking of during this past budget where that came up in Public Health Committee related to fire and Public Defender. That there was some discussion kind of about using salary savings for other purposes. And so kind of related to, I guess, your work, I'm interested in knowing, like, is there salary savings being used for other things outside the salary bucket? And kind of getting into the one-time expenses, and like, what are those one-time expenses? And that, I feel like, would really be informative for us for the next budget, in particular to questions that we're asking of departments. So if you're able to add that in some way, that would be helpful.
So with the top 10 that we identified, we were asking, and we would give them the number, at least for fiscal year 23. We don't really have it for 24, but we can still ask. How were your salary funds remaining used? Please specify the expenditures, and then the timing of the expenditures.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Cause like with fire, you know they got a lot of overtime. So, I mean, that's not something that's ever gonna change until we get up to the numbers that we need as a city.
I understand. I think
Yeah.
there's like,
Yeah.
there's conflict, I think, within the council and within
To look at.
departments about, are you using it within like a salary aspect? Are you taking money and using it for something else that is not salary related, and kind of where the lines are, and having more of that understanding.
Yeah, so if they're using it for overtime, that's still salary.
Yeah.
But if it's for training, for software updates, you know, some other,
Stuff like
Piece of
that, we need to
equipment.
know that.
yeah. Okay. Any other questions we should ask of the Big Ten?
Or do we have an SEC as well?
I mean, I think some of it kind of bleeds together with the lowest budget percentage in the Big Ten, because we would also want to ask the Big Ten about their vacant positions, plan to fill them, what's the salary.
And maybe I think we can ask very similar questions to both. Yeah.
Yeah. Because the only thing with the lowest percentage, we wouldn't be asking them how they spent the money. We're wondering
Right.
why.
Line red. So
Well, I don't know, I think you just had a good question right there. I mean, sort of, you know, when you went through it and on the vacancies, and it's not just about money, it's about the vacancies too. Why, what are those vacancies, you know, for the department, even on the big ones? And why haven't you been able to fill them? Well, we know why fire and police can't fill them, but we don't really know what planning's looking for with 18 people and why they haven't been able to fill them.
Right.
And I think that might lead into your question, and well, if they're 40 at 18 at 40, we need to maybe look at how that department is structuring their pay scale.
And I think we wouldn't get into the
Pay
super
scale,
into the
yeah.
super into the weeds, but
Right.
we might from a bird's eye view, we might be able to eyeball and say, wait a second, you know, what if we restructure it this way?
What is a fair amount of time for departments to turn these answers around?
That would be that would be them a question. I mean,
If you had to answer this list of questions, what would be a fair amount of time?
23 and 24. I would say relatively a couple of weeks,
say
just
at
in
least
case.
two.
They really do have to look through a lot of data, especially if they're a large department, if it's accumulative, a lot of purchases or a lot of movements.
Okay.
Might take a couple of weeks.
So I will, I'll draft the questions and send them to Director Darby so that she can send them out to these different departments and give them a 2-week deadline for when she sends them out. And then set a new committee meeting for maybe like a week from there.
Okay.
So she can get the questions back, they can get uploaded, the answers back, and it can get uploaded. We can actually be able to look at it, because that's going to be a lot of information. We're going to need time to look at it before the next working group meeting. Does that sound like a plan?
that sounds like a plan.
Sounds good.
We're all right. I appreciate y'all. If
Yeah.
there's nothing else, we are adjourned.
Everybody come talk about pets downstairs.